Hello again, everybody. As requested, today I'm going to be reading chapters 3 and 4 of the novel One to Borrow, One to Fake, One to Consummate. And I just want to thank everybody who sent in their message of support and your kind words. And for those who've ordered the book, thank you very much. I noticed last time that I was whispering for some reason, so I'll try my best to speak normally as when I read this time. So here we go. Chapter 3. It was only after my 10th attempt to call Seva at Nausori Airport that realization finally dawned on me. The git had blocked my number. I was seething now. Here I was, back from a work trip that helped pay for his car payments, and he wasn't even there to pick me up in said car. God help me from screaming out every Fijian cuss word my parents taught me never to say. I had no choice but to hop into a taxi with a $5 flag fall. Every angel and demon in hell must be laughing at me now. Nandera, I all but barked at the driver. Thankfully, Sunday morning traffic isn't as horrendous as weekdays, but it wasn't enough to sweeten my sour mood. In an attempt at conversation, the taxi driver struck a generic one up about the rainy Suva weather and potholes as large as lava pits. I glared out the window in answer. Once in a while, I tried Seva's number again, despite getting the same dead tone at the end of the line. Soon we pulled up in front of my house. I refused the taxi driver's offer to help me with my luggage. I suspected he watched me in amusement as I flung the gate open and almost twisted my ankle in the struggle. Since it was Sunday morning, I knew my landlord upstairs would be away at church. The landlord's cat catwalked its way to my front door. She was intent to let me know that I was a squatter seeking refuge in her territory. I pay my rent, I said, and kicked her aside. She flew precariously in the air before landing like a ninja. Cats really did have 9 lives. I was disappointed. I opened my front door to a spotless home, compliments of our family house girl I hired to spring clean my place once a fortnight. Nevertheless, I didn't plan on enjoying a clean home after half a month away. I had business to settle with Seva. At first, I needed to get my system more fired up so I could maintain my outrage. I was not about to give Seva the benefit of the doubt. And no, I was not even going to consider that he might have gotten himself into a life-threatening accident. For all I knew, he could be trapped and unconscious in his car after falling into a ravine while on his way to pick me. I shook the thought out of my head. He was not getting an ounce of sympathy from me, no siree. Turning towards the kitchen, I held my refrigerator door open. There was half a bottle of red wine and an unopened bottle of white. No thanks. Wine was my happy drink. Sometimes I paired it with a roll of BH to unwind. Speaking of which, I had an old packet with 3 rolls left tucked away in my bedside cabinet. Together they made me light on my feet and loose with my tongue, then knocked me out into glorious sleep. Of course, that was not what I was gunning for. I needed fire and brimstone, something that would awaken the she-devil within. It was no less than what Seva deserved from me. Crap, I was all out of vodka too. Then I remembered my duty-free rum. I decided that I wasn't going to bootleg it to the highest bidder at work after all, so I ripped the rum open like the madwoman that I was. I cracked a tray of ice loose and emptied some cubes into a glass. I relished the burn of rum down my throat and the fire it lit in my belly. I didn't know how many swigs I took of the drink or how many times I replenished my glass, but who's counting? When I felt armed enough with liquid recklessness but sane enough to put one foot in front of the other, I dialed Nandera comfort cabs. My carriage arrived under 5 minutes. Mid-road, I instructed the taxi driver. I pressed my hand against my mouth as the taxi lurched forward. The concoction of bile and alcohol rose threateningly up my throat. Don't throw up now, Nina. I made for Seva's flight of steps as soon as the taxi pulled into the driveway. The taxi hadn't even come to a complete stop. The driver looked at me like I was suicidal. He would have wanted to be rid of me, but I hadn't paid my fare. Seva rented a 4-bedroom flat from a family now residing in New Zealand. He split the rent with his friends. Once it had carried the memories of a fun hangout on the days I was tired of my own company. Now the bachelor pad was the target of my drunken rage. The living room sliding doors were wide open, revealing 3 male bodies lounging about an empty box of pizza. Seva! It didn't occur to me until after I had bellowed his name that Seva was just as absent as his missing car that should have been parked out front. But if I were to locate the itinerant man, the clue would be with his flatmates. The male with a glass of coke held to his lips spluttered at my sudden intrusion. Nina, you're back. Where is Seva? They could stuff their preamble. Seva's flatmates looked awkwardly at each other. They got up like pregnant women in their final trimester of gestation. The way Leroy scratched his head and Anasa rubbed his neck was enough to let me know that they were about to lie for their homeboy. But it was Tico who spoke first. He's not here. Clearly, I flung my arms out in disbelief at the evasive answer. Where is he? Again, the awkward look between conspirators. Okay, fine. Give me a phone and I'll call him myself and find out. I turned to Leroy with my hand held out. I expected no resistance, but it was precisely what I got. What's wrong with your... He's blocked my number, I said through gritted teeth. There was a second of silence, then a blast from the taxi horn downstairs. I spun around and hollered over the railing. Arey, wait karo yaar, I'm coming, just 1 second. When I returned to the boys, I could catch the last murmurings of their sentences. Fire, just tell her. It's their problem, not ours, Anasa was saying. Tell me what? He's gone to have lunch with his family, said Tico. And? I knew there was more going on than just lunch with the family. Tico held his hands up in surrender. That's all we're going to tell you, Nina, but it's the truth. You'll find Seva in his family home. Fine, I said, and I marched down the stairs. Then I had another thought that I believed the boys should know before I left. They were even more surprised when they saw me standing by the sliding doors again. I had one hand on my hips and a finger pointed at each guy I addressed. If I find out that you've warned your boy about my coming, Leroy, I'll tell Lena where you actually were last Christmas. I needed both my hands to make the quotation marks in the air before I turned on Tico. I'll tell your father what you've done with your school fees, and as for you, Anasa, your pastor will not be happy if he ever finds out about what you read besides your Bible. Boom! I knew they waited until I was out of earshot before they cursed the living daylights out of me, but they could eat my taxi dust because Seva was next. Chapter 4. Seva's family home was a large wooden house on stilts, well placed on a cul-de-sac in Cunningham, Stage 3. His army officer father and hospital matron mother lived there with his twin brothers in their high school senior years, and a handful of young extended family members from the outer islands of Laos who came to pursue an education in the city. I handed the driver a 20. Keep the change, I said. A grin split the driver's lips, wiping the stunned expression from his face when he realized that I was not joking. I could tell he had forgiven me for my antiques, but he wasn't going to stick around to see what else I had up my sleeves. He jumped when I slammed the door a little too hard. Then he slammed the accelerator. Smiley, Seva's family dog, greeted me the way Seva should have at the airport. Down, boy! The white and brown mixed breed mutt jumped up at me despite my objections. His tail wagged as fast as a hummingbird's wings. Smiley intended to give me wet kisses, but I wasn't drunk enough not to mind dog drool on my face. Okay, Kwan! I shooed him away with an irritated flick of the wrist. Smiley reluctantly returned to all fours and followed me up the wooden steps of the house. There was laughter and a whole lot of chatter coming from the open doorway. Something was up. It didn't sound like the usual Sunday get-together. I spied the kitchen wall clock, 1:30 p.m. Wow, I didn't know I had spent so much time downing rum. I removed my shoes and gave a knock below the door's glass panel. No answer. The chatter didn't even die down. Ndombula! As pissed off at Seva as I was, my voice came out a little shaky. I knew I had to assert myself better when we came face to face. No wonder no one heard me, so I entered uninvited. I walked through the kitchen until I arrived at the living room. A long Bulla-printed tablecloth was laid out on the floor. A sumptuous feast adorned its length. Seva's whole family was gathered around the spread for lunch, and they were dressed with more festivity than an ordinary Sunday lunch called for. Bulla, I said again. My eyes landed on Seva and his on mine. He looked like a child caught with his hands in the Milo tin. There was an awkward silence. My eyes quickly scanned the room. I recognized everyone except the young woman who sat to Seva's left. I didn't have to wonder long about the stranger's identity because Seva's 7-year-old cousin Rossi piped up, Go Akanisi, okona ni Seva. I must have heard wrong. Who was Akanisi? Whoever she was not Seva's girl, as Rossi claimed. I was. But a girl was sitting right there next to Seva, and not just sitting beside him like an acquaintance, but as someone who was more than a friend. She even wore a dress in the same kalavata as Seva's shirt. I felt blindsided by a speeding Nasese bus. Standing there, obviously looking the part of a fool, I would have given anything to relieve my panic attack in LAX. But this was beyond what I could handle. No, I refused to pass out, throw up, or cry in front of my audience. I was angry before, but now I was a bull seeing red. I had no courtesy for Seva's father, who sat at the head of the gathering, neither for his wife. Or they? My voice no longer shook. Mbulalewa, come and join us, said Seva's mother. Her voice was tight. I knew she was trying to ease the tension in the room. Unfortunately, her words fell on my burning deaf ears. I took a step closer. Odhei naelewango. I pointed a stiff finger at the girl called Akanisi. She looked at me, then at Seva, clearly disturbed. I knew her name, but I wanted to know more. Scratch that. I didn't want to know anything. I wanted to go in for the kill. But my strength and speed were not what I had imagined them to be. Instead of tearing Seva's head from his neck as planned, he had me around the waist before I even noticed. Then he dragged me back out the way I had come. All my Krav Maga training flew out the window as my wrecked emotions overtook my sense of decorum. I protested in my loudest voice all the way down the wooden stairs, but I couldn't even register my own words. They came out in a spate of accusation, exasperation, and infuriation. All the while, Seva was silent. He finally released me, and we came to a face-off underneath the house. Seva spoke first. Have you been drinking? He gritted the words out in a violent whisper through his teeth. He was livid. The red showing through his dark skin was a telltale sign that he was also very embarrassed. I snorted and pointed an accusing finger at him. Oh no, don't you dare. This is not about me. This is about you and why you're bringing another girl to your parents' house. I gave him no room to speak. My words flew out at him one after the other. Who is Akanisi and what is she doing here? Is it true what Rosie said? Is she your girlfriend? Why did you block my number? She looked down. Aseva looked down at his feet. Well, answer me. He looked at me, then quickly looked away again. I'm planning to ask Akanisi to marry me. His words sucker punched me. I had to lean on a wooden pillar to keep from falling over. I took a deep breath. How dare you? How can you do this to me? I started to pace. Smiley barked at the both of us in agitation. Then he looked up the stairs and began to wag his tail. Dolakatani, said Seva, shooing his nosy cousins away. My back was turned towards them, but I heard their little feet scamper back up the stairs as their giggles echoed down to me. Seva's reprimand seemed to send his blood boiling. Now it was his turn to be indignant. How can I do this to you? Bulldozing your way in here like an uncultured Fijian woman. His words slapped some sobriety into me. Seva rubbed the back of his neck, a familiar action I knew to mean he didn't want to let his emotions best him. I don't know what we are, Nina, because it's certainly not boyfriend and girlfriend. His brown eyes took on a look of liquid honey. His brows furrowed in consternation. It was that look of part plea, part vexation that made me surrender every time we argued. But not now. Before we made up, I needed to get in a few blows myself. How do you think I feel when I go off on a work trip, only to come back exhausted and to find out my boyfriend has blocked my number because he's trying to hide his new relationship? I work so hard that we can afford a good future together, and you repay me by running around behind my back? I accused. It would be better if you were a gigolo. I let that last line sink in. At least then you'd get paid for your services, but I'd know that it was nothing serious. My voice rose higher and higher with every syllable. I knew I had hit him below the belt, way below the belt. Vosira! The whole neighborhood will hear you, Seva berated. I don't care. I said. I pointed an accusing finger at him. I added. If anyone should be embarrassed, it was him. He was in the wrong. Seva laughed, not the reaction I expected. He bowed his head, then nodded several times over in an attempt to convince himself to speak his next words. When he looked back up at me, he said, See, that's the problem with what we have. You've taken the manhood from our relationship and you want me and everybody else to know who wears the pants between us. I'm the blue-collared laborer and you're the top-notch university grad, seeing the world and buying what you want. Nothing can touch you. A Nissan pulled into the roundabout. No one got off. I knew the occupants just wanted to get a closer look at the rockers coming from below a wooden house. Neither Seva nor I cared at first, but when the car remained longer than necessary, I hollered, Elaba, do mai sarele. It sped off in no time. I turned my attention back to Seva, who had used the interval to gather his assault. It's all about what you bring to the relationship. It's always about you supporting us financially. You don't know what that does to your ego. I cut in abruptly. Seva wiped the sweat from his brow. "Kilana taba, sometimes I wonder if you're embarrassed by me." "That's not true," I argued. "If that's your reason for bringing another woman into your life, then you're crazy." The man who once said he loved me now looked at me with foreign eyes. "No, no, think about it. I don't know any of your friends because you never invite me to one of your high-class meetups. Your social media is all about work, your political views, and all the exotic places you visit. No one even knows we're together." A wounded dog would lick its wound before it admits that he fought a lion. Seva was making it about me again, that it was my fault he was with another woman. "Oh, come on, everybody knows we're together." I didn't sound convincing even to myself. What he said about my social media activity was true, but his claim was outrageous. It had nothing to do with my embarrassment of being in a relationship with him. In fact, he sh- if he should be embarrassed, if he should pin anything on me, it should be that I was so comfortable and confident about our relationship I didn't need to advertise it to the world. Seva picked up a fallen clothes peg from the dirt floor. He was calm. That was not a good sign. He stretched the peg legs, never once looking up at me as he did. It was like he had already resigned himself to a life without me. "I see. That's why you don't put any effort into us. We don't go out as much. You call when you need something. You refuse to come to my village. And you don't even post pictures of us on social media, all because everybody knows we're together." His words dripped with sarcasm, but his voice lacked it. The neutrality was deadly. A breeze caught the clothes that hung out to dry on an extended network of plastic cords zigzagging above us. Seva raised a hand to stop a pair of shots from flapping into his face. I noticed the tattoo on the side of his thumb. They were the initials of our high school. It brought back nostalgic memories of better days void of adult drama. "So let me ask you, what's the use? Nadavnambetendaro." I couldn't answer him. What was the use of our being together? He obviously saw none. I knew there must be some reason that would make me want to salvage our relationship. Why else was I arguing with him under his house? But I clutched at straws, trying to find it in a mental file of distant memories. I could tell him the truth that it would break my heart if we broke up. It was a selfish reason, I know. I could say that being with me meant I could still help him with his car payments, but that would be the last thing he wanted to hear. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm your boyfriend or your dog on a leash," Seva continued. "Arguments always become a pity party. Both parties make themselves out to be the victim and the other side the perpetrator. I certainly wasn't going to be the bigger man. Seva wouldn't get an apology from me, not when I saw no fault of my own despite what he said. It was time to turn the tables on him. "How come you never asked me to marry you?" "I did, 4 years ago, and you weren't ready then. Are you ready now?" I stuttered in my weak attempt to protest. He wasn't lying. 4 years ago, I had been into my final year of university. I was interning at an NGO, sure of my position there after graduation. Seva already had steady cash flow coming in from his carpentry contracts. With our combined income and the absence of a child, we could continue pursuing our education, him in construction and me a postgrad. It had been the perfect time to pop the question, not in a romantic drop down on one knee sort of way that I would have liked, rather a question of convenience. He thought we were clearly heading in the direction of marriage and starting a family together. In contrast, I was satisfied with how things were between us. I didn't want to preempt a future I didn't crave so soon. Where, where Seva saw a new exciting life together, I saw my liberty sacrificed on the altar of matrimony and motherhood. So I hadn't answered him back then. I had no answer now. Seva sighed deeply, but we knew I was caught in my own web. I had no reason to complain because my actions, or inaction I should say, made him look elsewhere. Well, I'm ready, and I'm going to marry someone ready to be with me, someone who doesn't just want to have a man from whose arms she can hang off and take well-timed pictures that tell a lie. He didn't mention anything about money, but I knew it played a lot into his rationale for leaving me. I bet Akanisi was a school dropout. The only employment she would probably qualify for was a cleaner, a cashier, or an unqualified nanny. As a couple, they would rely primarily on Seva's one income, but that would be okay for him because it meant he would wear the pants for a change. Seva walked to an adjacent pillar and drummed an agitated beat on the smooth wood with his fingers. "There's nothing else to say apart from good luck. I wish you well in life, and you can come to my wedding if you like." You'll really like Akanisi, I promise. I spat at his feet and stormed off.